Welcome back to Auto Technic, and today is the day we've all been waiting for. After months of work on this F355 project, we are going to button it up and get it back where it belongs, and that's out on the open road. So I just finished the other video where I walked you guys through the process to synchronize the ITBs on this car, and hopefully you guys followed along and enjoyed that process. And that was really the last big hurdle, or the last tedious, meticulous thing that we had to do to the car. And frankly, today is what we need to do is put it back together. So if any of you have never worked on a Ferrari or a 355, you can see that I have all of my under trays lined up over here. And if you notice, they're held on with an incredible amount of hardware. There's a lot of hardware holding these on. And when I first started with the brand, that never made much sense to me. I kind of thought it was overkill. Like, why is there so much hardware holding these panels onto the car? And someone else mentioned it to me, which then it clicked in my head and made all the sense in the world. You have to think that all of these under trays are meant to create a low pressure area under the car. Most of these cars are meant to do 190 plus miles an hour. You have to think about the amount of force that these trays are seeing where it's trying to pull them down off of the car. Once I thought of it that way, it made all the sense in the world why there's so much hardware on there. Why am I talking about all the hardware on there? Because it takes a little bit longer than you'd think to get them all installed. On top of that, you can see over here we have all of our rear inner fenders. We got to get those all taken care of. And these are the front wheelhouse trims up here. I mean, heck, for example, this is all the hardware that we're going to have to reassemble onto the car. And then I have some small sections for the front trunk liner up here. We'll open this up, where we have all this open, and I need to get that all reassembled, put back together. Also, you can see this car has a stereo, and I have all the stereo out because, if you see right there, front bumper's off the car, so we need to reassemble that and put that back onto the car. However, before we deal with any of the reassembly, there's still two more main tasks that I need to take care of. The kind of last of the service before it's just reassemble it and get it on the road. The first of those tasks is I need to run through and do another emissions test. So I have my 5-gas analyzer here. I have my initial test that I did. So I pull a measurement off each bank 1 and 2, and I do it at idle and 3,000 RPM. So on almost every Ferrari, especially of this era, if we jump down there, you can see there's a little brass nipple right here that's coming out of the secondary air rail. I can take this cap off, and you'll see that little port down there. That gives me access for the pre-catalytic converter emissions. So it's one thing we use to judge the health of the engine, but also we did it pre-service. We're going to do it post-service. That way we can see if the engine's running better than when it came in, if it's running worse, and there's something we need to look at. And it's just another data point to know that we have a car, an engine that's in good health. So since I just finished synchronizing the throttle bodies and the engine's still warming up the temperature, that's the first thing I'm going to tackle right now. right, so you can see that only took a couple minutes, but a little bit more on the side of coordination as I had to reach in there for the throttle so I can bring the engine RPM up. I have to be able to see my SD1 so I can track my engine RPM. And I have to keep the emissions tester and printer close so that way I can actually reach the printer button. Fortunately, they're magnetic and I can just stick them to the back of the car, they stay put. And that way I can kind of do all of that at once, get my emissions reports printed out. Now, on our pre-service emissions, we really didn't see anything that was too alarming. We were a little bit high on bank 1 on our hydrocarbons, but nothing alarming. You have to keep in mind now, after all the work we did, we have brand new valve guides. The heads have been cleaned. There's not an ounce of carbon in the heads. I cleaned all the carbon off the pistons. It has brand new spark plugs. We've got the cam timing dialed on dead on spec, and we've synchronized the ITBs. This thing should be running very clean and nice, and it is. And we can see that in our emissions. So our bank 1 hydrocarbons was at 170 parts per million pre-service, and post-service we're at 74. Everything else, our CO is pretty close. O2 is pretty much the same. Don't expect that to move. CO2 is pretty much right on. So the only real movement we see is on our hydrocarbons, which is, I will say, for the most part, when I'm doing these services, what's the one that I'm looking for the most, because I'll see the most movement on that if there's something askew. Again, at 3,000 RPM, it really came down. We were at 229 parts per million. We're down to 86. So it cleaned up quite a bit. And it's the same thing over here on bank 2. So, like I said, it's quick, it's easy. We have the how the car came in. We did all of our work. We have how the car left. We can see a tangible difference and an improvement. And it also confirms that the car is running good. So that way I can ensure that when I give it back to the client, it's better than when he dropped it off with me. Now that that's out of the way, there's one more thing we need to take care of before I can focus on just getting this car reassembled and buttoned back up, and that's a brake flush or a brake bleed. We had the engine out of the car for a couple months. The brake system was open, so we need to bleed it, but really we need to flush it. So yes, there's air in the system because I had it cracked open for such a long time, but more importantly, I need to get all of the old fluid out of this car and fresh fluid in. I've talked about this a couple times on the channel. Brake fluid attracts moisture. That moisture gets into the brake lines and causes all kinds of problems, especially on cars that sit and aren't used that frequently. I've seen more brake fluid related problems on Ferraris than I've ever seen on any other car. Brake fluid attracts moisture. So that moisture gets into the brake fluid. We know that it lowers the boiling point of the brake fluid. We all know that. But it also reacts with it and it forms like this white waxy buildup. I almost think it kind of gets acidic because I see it causing a lot of corrosion on aluminum components. It also causes the brake lines to swell. I've had it where the brake lines on these cars get swollen all the way shut and no fluid travels through. We usually find that during the brake flush process. We find problems where it plugs the reservoir, plugs the master cylinder, causes corrosion in the master cylinder, and also in the ABS control unit. It can get in there and wreak all kinds of havoc. And that brings another point. If you have the ability to cycle the ABS pumps during a brake bleed, it doesn't have to be a Ferrari. Any car you have, absolutely do that. You want to cycle those valves. You want to get every ounce of fluid that's in there flushed out. Get fresh fluid in that doesn't have any moisture in there. Depending on how the car is driven, if someone just, casually drives the car around and they're never really in traction control or ABS, those valves and that pump's never functioning. It's never moving. It's never moving through fluid through those circuits, and that's the worst thing you could have. Anyways, with that, we're fortunate we have the SD1, so I can connect up in here onto my ABS control unit. Now this is a Bosch 5.3. I will say that the early 355s have a TEVIS or TEVS, and it's a very different brake system. It's a electric motor basically, rather than a more traditional vacuum assisted booster like this. So the TEVIS cars do not have the vacuum pump back here off of bank 2 on the engine. And also when you bleed the brakes in those cars, you need to have the key on so that way you have the brake assist in order to push the brake fluid through. One more thing that I need to touch on, and that's if you're using any kind of piece of diagnostic equipment to run a brake bleed or a brake flush, you need to have some sort of power supply onto the car. So this is a stabilized power supply. It's made by Medtronics. It's a PSC 550. These are specifically made for essentially like software programming on cars, like updating modules where it's a really clean, steady state 14.4 volts, and it's not going to cause any interference. I say this as in, I have the key on, the ignition's on, this car is the F1, so the F1 pump's going to periodically be running. We're also going to be running the ABS pump. We don't want our voltage to drop down. One, it's really hard on the battery, and I want to be sure that this customer's battery is in great shape, and when I give the car back to him, it's fully charged. Two, you have to keep in mind, the newer the car, the more electronics that are in it. The more that electronics that are in the car, the quicker that battery is going to drain if you just sit there and leave the key and ignition on, even if the car's not running. Say like my son's Chevelle or even my truck back here, I can leave the key on for a while because there's really no electronics, there's no consumption of the current and of the battery. Newer cars, that's not the case. So it's really hard on the battery, especially if we're running through these test plans. So it's not only a matter of putting a battery charger on the car, you need to be cognizant of what you're putting on. So for example, the best example I have is some cars when I was working at BMW, the battery chargers we had at the time actually showed you the outgoing amperage into the car. And those cars were averaging 25, 30 amps. Sitting there with the radio off, all the consumers off. The fan was off, the climate control was off, all the heaters were off, the engine was off. Nothing was really operating and it was consuming 25 amps. So if we let the car sit here and we're pulling 25 amps out of it, I mean, you're going to drain the battery super quick. So the ones like this one, I think this does like 40 or 50 amps. I can't remember. But I'm just saying you need to be paying attention to your battery charger. If you put a battery charger on that only outputs 5 amps and you're leaving the key on, we're still draining our battery. So we did the right thing by having a battery charger on, but we're not putting in enough versus what we're taking out. So just pay a little bit of attention to that and do the best you can. It's not critical or like a must-have, but it is something worth talking about. So you can see that I have everything hooked up now. I got my brake bleeder on. It's got pressure in it. I got all my bleeder caps off the car. I got a piece of foam there so that way we can open the door up and I don't have to worry about the lift, so I can get my volunteer in the car. They're just going to sit in there and run the pedal for me, and I'm going to be bouncing around from my tester to the rest of the car and getting everything bled. So with that, it's time to get to it and get this knocked out. All right, you ready? All right, pump. Okay. Yeah, that's the valves and the pump running through their cycle. Keep going. That bleeder was partially plugged, so you have to push the fluid through it. Do it again. Push. So I can hear the fluid going into the bucket when you do that. No, it's good. We're going to run through this cycle, and then I'm going to come back through and bleed them a little bit longer because this isn't pushing much fluid through, but it's doing, huh? Well, I mean, it's meant to be a bleed, which is different than a flush. Okay, pump. There you go. That one's good. Turn the key off. Press and holding down. Key on. Yeah. So with the help of my wife, we were able to run through the brake bleed procedure with the SD1. Now there's a couple things to note, and that's really when I got up to the front calipers, I actually had a couple of the bleeders that didn't want to flow fluid without a lot of force on the brake pedal, meaning I still had the brake bleeder on the car and it had about 30 psi on it, and it did not want to push fluid through those bleeders initially. And it wasn't until my wife really got on the pedal and pushed pretty hard that it freed those up and got all the fluid moving through, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier with the blockages that happens in there with really old fluid. Now, as brake fluid ages, it gets a lot darker and it starts to solidify, and that's probably what was happening. I did see that the fluid that was coming out of this car was pretty black. When we did our pre-service inspection, I did check the moisture content in the reservoir, and if I remember correctly, it was at 2%, which is pretty much our limit, but it looked a lot worse when it was coming out of the calipers. So because of that, we did have flow out of all the calipers. They all did free up. I didn't have to dig any deeper, fortunately. But because of that, once I finished with the brake bleed procedure, I just went back through and just used the pressure bleeder and flushed more fluid through the system to ensure that I got all of that old fluid out. So it was really an exercise of a peace of mind. I wanted to be sure that I got all traces of that old fluid out, made sure that there's no blockages and everything was free and clear, so that way there's no issues with this customer and his car down the road. So with that taken care of, it's time to put everything back together, because we no longer really need access to our reservoir or our ABS control unit. So before we just jump right into fully reassembling the car, I need to pivot a little bit and we need to address the front bumper I have sitting back there. The reason being is my main mounting points for that front bumper are right up in here behind that trunk trim, right where those big rectangles are. You can see it's kind of hard at the angle, but that's where the hardware comes in to tighten and secure the front bumper. So before I get all the trim back in, I need to get the bumper on, positioned, and adjusted. And well, now's finally time to start talking about that thing. All right, so I had the front bumper off of the car because I actually had to take it into the body shop and have it repainted. Now the reason why it was repainted is, well, it's because I'm an idiot and I messed it up. So early on during the repairs, I had the car sitting just like this on the lift, lowered all the way down, and I wasn't even working on the car. I actually was moving an engine on an engine stand around, actually out from this area and out. And as I was doing so, I was being careful to avoid the car and all the parts I had over here. And I caught something on the floor, my engine stand pivoted over, and the worst thing that can happen to me when I have a client's car in the shop happened. The engine stand went into the bumper. Now this bumper did have a PPF or clear bra on it, and unfortunately that engine stand went clear through that and tore it, and actually went through the paint and put a pretty good scratch right over here. It was about 1 inch long. And I can tell you that that ruined, I would say, more than a day for me. That ruined a couple weeks. I was pretty upset about it, in a pretty bad mood, because it's just honestly the last thing I ever want to have happen to any car, even my own, especially a client's, especially a Ferrari. Fortunately, I showed it to the client. He was here. I showed it to him in person, fessed up, told him it was all my fault. I got to give the client credit, handled it really nicely, very well, very gracious about it. He did offer me an easy out, which I appreciated, but that wasn't the right thing to do, and I politely declined that. And I told him that I was going to take the bumper off, I was going to strip it down. I stripped the PPF off of it myself. I dropped it off at the body shop. I got it repainted for him. And they even went through and fixed the other damage that was already existing, so it's better than it was before. You can see that I have it reassembled already. I put all the lights and fog lights in it, the grill. It's ready to go back on. You can see on the back side that all of our wiring and brake ducts, they're all there, and it's ready to go back on the car. So I'm doing all this no charge to the customer. He's not going to pay a dime for this, and really, in my eyes, that's the right way to go about it. I caused the damage. It happened in my care and custody. I'm not going to push the cost onto him. Now, I do feel pretty terrible about it. There was one small saving grace, and that is the fact that this bumper has actually been repainted once before in its lifetime. So it wasn't like I was hitting the original paint on a super low mileage bumper or something like that. Granted, scratching a customer's car is never good, but it feels really worse if it's the original paint. If it's been repainted before and I'm having it repainted now, it's kind of almost like a wash where they're only original once. And at least we didn't affect that. So with that out of the way, we need to get the bumper reinstalled back onto the car. Now, the bumper is held on with these two mounting bolts right here that mount to the center on either side. And then it has these bolts right here on the side that actually meet up to this plate right here. And you can see that this plate is on a slide on this plastic adapter there. So the depth of it is adjustable once you put the bumper on. So our main adjustment, you can see, is going to be up here. And these slide quite a bit. So once I get the bumper on, there's going to be a fair amount of shifting and adjusting, so that way I have a nice gap all the way around. You can see where I've already taped it off when I pulled it off, so that way you don't damage the paint up here. Now it is just me here once again, and I need to get this bumper on the car without causing any other damage. So my game plan is to raise the car up in the air. I'm going to use the table that I have it on, so that way it can hold the bumper at the right height, and I can just adjust the lift to get everything lined up. I'll get the bumper slid on, get some hardware started so it's not going to go anywhere, and then go through the adjustment procedure, get it adjusted, and get it on there. So let's get cracking and get this bumper back on the car. Looks like we need to go up more. Make sure we're clear. Last thing I want to do is raise the table with the lift and knock the bumper off. Actually get my electrical connectors plugged in for my lights. Save me a little bit of a headache. And we are good with our height at the back, this back edge, but we're low up here at the front. So I'm gonna have to lift it up to get these long bolts in the center. There's those two. Watch our back sides here. And now it's guiding the brake cooling ducts in. Get that positioned. So these outer edges of the bumper are held on with these little steel plates, and you can see that it has that big square hole for the adjustment, and as you tighten them up, it deforms this plate, which is pretty typical. What I'll actually do is I'll take this to my bench vise, the hammer, and I'm going to flatten these back out, because what I've found is the deformation that is occurring on these plates, it kind of limits my adjustment on the bumper, meaning this plate wants to sit exactly in there how it was last time, and depending if I have it in the same direction or side to side, it's going to fight my adjustment. I try to make an adjustment, then as I tighten it in, the plate kind of shifts and moves the bumper. So to prevent that, I go back through and just flatten them back out. It kind of gives me a fresh start to get them reinstalled, and it makes your final adjustment a whole lot nicer. So I'll try to show you guys. This is the plate that I just straightened real quick down and dirty, and here's the one from the other side. You can see how it deforms it in there quite a bit. So just another quick little trick that's going to help you get a much nicer and quicker bumper adjustment. Straighten our second plate and get this on there. So you can see right there how much adjustment there is and how big those squares are, and that's where this plate gets sucked in when you tighten it down, and inevitably it's going to deform it and kind of lock it in place. So that's why getting rid of those bends and helping straighten it out will give us a lot of a head start on our adjustments. I learned that trick by fighting bumper adjustments, and I finally realized that's why I was fighting them. So now I just go and straighten the pieces rather than just hoping that it's going to be right when I put it on and then straighten them if I need to. I just go straight for it these days. Alright, snugged in there, and peel our tape so we can see our adjustment we're working with. All the way around. So now we're gonna have to tighten it and get this gap taken care of. Make sure it's even all the way around. But in order to do so, I need the car down so I can work in the bonnet. And we don't need this guy anymore. That out of the way. And I guess bring the car down. And stop it midway up so it's a lot more comfortable for me to get in here. I got some good working space. Yep, that'll work. All right, let me drop you guys in here and show you what we're working with on the inside. So with the car lowered down and the bumper on, I can peek you guys in here and you might be able to see right there my stud sticking out. That's the lower one. And if I can get you up there, you can barely just see the upper stud and that hole. So you can see they're a couple inches back there. This runs at an angle, so the stud's actually running about like so through there. And I have to kind of tend with this trim here. I have to fight that. And the bad thing about this trim is it's a one-piece liner throughout the bottom of this trunk. And it's riveted on right here for this strap for the toolkit. So in order to take that out where I didn't have to bend it in and fight it, I would have to drill out those rivets, put in new rivets, and that's a little much. So we have enough flexibility here where we can push it over and we can get to the hardware. So my plan of attack is to run all the hardware in and get it snug so everything's not tightened down but snug, so that way the bumper is sitting where it's going to want to sit. And then we're going to figure out a way to get this held in place so I can make all my final adjustments. Start with just our washers. Really don't want to drop them. And get our nut started here. That's snug down. So we're going to back it off a little bit so we can adjust it. And move on to the lower one. Snug. Back it off just a little, and we'll move over to the other side. Solution. It's consistent with the rest of the gaps in the car. Pull it up anymore. All right, so as a one-man show, got to get creative when there's no extra sets of hands around to help out. So I have enlisted my floor jack, and I put a piece of wood across it to distribute the load evenly. Fortunately, the bumper in a 355 is completely rigid, so that way I can transfer the load up. That's why I left all the hardware loose. I have some foam and a microfiber fender cover on there, so we're protecting the paint. And I've brought the bumper up to the maximum as high as I can, essentially establishing this gap right here to this trim piece on the car. Now side to side the bumper is good, and I did have this hardware over here tightened just enough to where I can shift this bumper up and down to keep this gap matching, but I'm not worried about that because I can fine-tune that once we're set up front. So with all the hardware loose and I have this bumper up, this is as high as it's going to go. We're not going to close that gap anymore, and that is consistent with how it was before and also with the rear bumper. So now that that's set, we have everything ready to go. I'm going to come back and tighten down our 4 nuts here on the inside. Once those are tightened and torqued, I'm going to focus my attention to the outside and tighten down our hardware up here in the inner fender and finalize everything with that gap. But you can see right here that the bumper depth is good. We're lined up with the body line on the fender, and everything's pretty much right where it wants to go, which honestly isn't too much of a surprise. On these cars, they kind of go right back on where they wanted to be, but it's looking pretty good. So you can see right there, I can just move that down and it's snug enough where it stays, but my gap is too big now and then tightens up. So that's what I'm saying. I'm going to tighten everything in the center, and then I'm going to come back and fuss with this. So I was just checking my gap to be sure as I was tightening everything up that it's not closing up or moving on me. You never know, the bumper could be rocked at an angle, and as I tighten the bolts it could suck in, or it could be leaning out like so and suck in. So I just want to be sure that the gap is where I set it. That way I don't go too far and need to go back and make more adjustments. There we are. That being done, you can take this off. Lower this down. So that way we can raise the car and get it up in our line of sight. It'll make this outer adjustment a whole lot easier. I think that's it. I think we got it. Alright, so the front bumper is fully installed, locked in, and adjusted. And there's one more thing I wanted to show you on this car because I actually thought it was pretty cool. And it's the stereo system. So this car has a couple amps and a front sub that resides up here. And I can tell you that when I first went to go pull the bumper, I was dreading dealing with the stereo because my past experience, most of the time when there's a custom stereo install on a car, it's installed in a manner that is never friendly for a technician. It's hidden screws, you don't know where the hardware is, you got wiring. My biggest pet peeve is the stereo installers do not put connectors in it. And meaning then you end up chasing the wire, disconnecting everything. In general, it just really ends up being a nightmare and it adds a lot more time to the job. And when I saw this, I instantly thought for the worst. I was like, man, this is going to tie up a lot more time and cost me time getting the bumper off the car, which, well, I guess that's punishment for me scratching it. However, once I got into it, I was thoroughly impressed with the install on the last person that they did this. So much so that I want to run you guys through it and show you how this all works. So the setup is simple, but very clever and incredibly technician friendly. So for the last guy or whoever this guy was who installed this, I owe you a beer. We have our amps right here, and it's Macintosh amps. Well, I should say this system's like a strong throwback to the late 90s, early 2000s. Macintosh amps, an Eclipse 6-disc CD changer. The head unit in the car is an Eclipse. It is an absolute throwback. It's actually pretty funny because when my wife hopped in the car to do a brake flush, she saw the Eclipse head unit and it stirred some memories for her as well. So it's kind of fun to see that stuff. It's like a time capsule. But with that said, this is their setup. They built a false floor that sits into the trunk. and our amps are mounted to it right here. One, you can see a connector. Things are already looking good. I already like it. If I flip this around, this sits in the front of the trunk, and again, I have all the connectors I need, so this was easy to remove and pop out. But it has nice reinforcements, and this sits right up there. So this is pretty simple, and I'll show you how easy this just slides into position and how secure it is. This plate is not held in with any hardware. Actually, none of this is held in with any hardware. It all just sits in the front of the car, and it's all designed in a way where it doesn't move. It's super clever. I love it. So we got our amps and our mounting plate. We got our sub box here, and this only has the sub in it. They just put the nameplate from the amp on here for decorative, effect. But it's ported here. You can see the holes where the sub and the air and the sound can come out. But if we flip this over, we have the back side where our amps reside. Again, a connector. Thank you, last guy. But if we look right here, right there, you can see that it has that notch right here and this lip. So this sub box, that lip resides right on the top of this piece and locks it in place. So that's all I have to do to install it. I have to say that of all the stereos that I have pulled out of cars and dealt with, and even the systems that I've built myself, I've actually gone through and built custom fiberglass sub boxes for cars. This is the simplest, the cleanest, and the most effective. I'm pretty impressed. This just drops in and it does not move one bit. That just drops in and goes right on top of it. With the connectors, it's going to take me a matter of 2 minutes to put this in. So much so that I'm going to bring you guys along with me as we get this installed, just because honestly, I'm impressed. I really like this. Whoever built it was thinking ahead and thinking about serviceability. I greatly appreciate that. So with that, let's get it off the table and back into the car. All right, see if we can't get this in there. It is a little heavy and a little awkward, but it's manageable. So make sure I get my CD changer connector wrapped around. And as I said, they gave me enough slack where I could easily get my connectors plugged in. And my RCA cables, which I marked these so I knew what was what. I should have done that main connector last. Let me get that out of my way. There we go. We got more slack here for these RCAs. This will be better. Take my tape off. Plug in our main connector. And all of our wiring just sits behind that little gap that they built into it. Slide our carpet in. It sits just like that. So you can see that now there's that gap right there where the sub box just latches on, and that's how it holds it in. Super clever, very creative. So we got our CD changer wiring there, but you can see it locks in right here at the trunk. Sits great. Connectors are easy to get to. I didn't have to deal with the wiring. So for the sub box, just drop that in. Get that connected. There we are. Sits just like that. Might want to bring it over a little. So I'm going to leave the sub box slid over here a little bit so I can get the CD changer screwed in. So the CD changer is going to screw just straight down into this, I presume it's MDF base plate that everything's built off of. And that's one thing that I really like about this setup, is there's no holes that are drilled into the car. So let's say if this car moves hands to a different owner down the road and they don't want the stereo in there, they can take it out and there's no evidence or signs that it was ever there. And particularly when it comes to Ferraris, but when I'm working on any newer car, I don't like drilling holes in them. I like to find ways to use existing holes, build brackets, and work with what I have, because If you drill holes, like I said, this was super cool in the 90s. Someone now probably doesn't want it. If we drilled a bunch of holes going through the floor, sure, it works great while it's in here, but once you take it out, then you have all those holes. And I just don't like that kind of stuff because our minds change on what we like. There's trends, there's fads, there's different owners. I like to keep everything super reversible. Sure, when I'm working on my own truck back there, that's a different story. It's an old custom hot rod. I'll drill holes, cut things, weld, fabricate. I'll do that all day long. Newer cars, especially Ferrari, I don't like drilling holes. So, that's all in place. Like I said, super trick. I really like it. Real clever, and it's a real great solution for what they came up with. What I need to do now is really all the stuff that's worth talking about and covering is taken care of. I need to get this car reassembled. All I have left to do is finish all the trunk trims. We have our under trays, our wheel wells. We need to get the wheels and tires on and the rear bonnet, cover up our ECUs inside the car, and it's ready to hit the road. So I'm just going to focus on getting that stuff knocked out real quick, and I'll see you guys back once we get the car out on the road. right, we're finally ready. Fully back together. I got it warmed up. It's up to temperature. It's time to go hit the road. So on our pre-service road test, I did a really thorough evaluation of the car, driving it, checking all the functions, documenting everything, and just an overall evaluation of the car. Now that we've combed through it, we know the condition of the car, we've done all the work. This drive is going to be more about making sure all the work that I did is right, it's good, there's no problems, the car is driving and running as it should. So with that, I'm not going to bore you guys, I'm not going to do a lot of talking, I'm just going to be quiet. We're going to hit the road, and I'll let you guys enjoy it along with me. Well, here we are about 10 minutes later, and you can see good old Seattle got us. We got quite a bit of weather coming in, and honestly, truth be told, I knew that was coming, and I was working around that on the test drive. I knew I had a very small window today to get the car out on the road with some dry roads, which is 100% my preference, and we were able to do so. I just finished up from the road test. I came in, I double checked my oil level. We were a hair low, so we added some oil, got that right up to the minimum mark where I like it. I had to add about half a quart to the gearbox. I made it a lot easier on myself. I just popped out the left-hand air filter assembly so I can get to the plug. It's a lot easier that way. Gearbox is topped off. I checked the coolant this morning. It's set. I double-checked the wheel torques. I do that, but I'm really cautious about that since we did all those wheel inserts. I want to make sure everything's seated and fully tight and all the way down. So at this point, the car is fully back together. It's fully assembled. So really back here, there's just not a whole lot. We have these side trim pieces that kind of cover the wiring and some of the structure, but the rest of it has this beauty cover over expansion tank and power steering reservoir, and it's just the plenums and all of the air inlet tubes, really. And one of my things that I really like to do is be sure that I get all my hose clamps pointing vertical, all the same direction. That's just one of those other things that makes it look a lot nicer in here versus having hose clamps running every which way. And you can see that I put the top back on for the road test. It's just a little bit easier for me with the top on to hear the sound of the engine, noises in the car, and just give it a good evaluation so that way I'm not worrying about all the wind noise with it. So the top's back on. You can see we have all the seat covers off. So we have all of our ECU covers back on. You can see here on this side, this is where the gearbox ECU was, so I had that off to be able to pull faults and parameters out of it. On the other side is the engine computer that we dealt with, and so all that trim is back on the car. You can see that the seat covers are out of it, and we're fully back together. You guys may have noticed during the course of the repairs that I had the binnacle off. We did replace actually repaired the F1 gauge. That was one of the things we noted when we first got the car. So that's fixed, and we're all back together and pretty much ready to give back to the client. Drop you guys up here. You can see fully reassembled. I have all the client's records that he has with the car up top. That's the leather cover for the top. All this trims back in, and I talked about it. There's some kind of paste that they use underneath this seal. When you pull it off, it flakes and it fills up everywhere over here and gets all over this carpet. There's no way around it, so just once you get everything back together, you got to come back to the vacuum, spend some time getting it all cleaned up and taken care of. So she is on the ground, the wheels are on, she's torqued. There is two lingering things that I do need to take care of. One of them is our front bumper. I still need to take it in and get the clear bra put back on it. So we're not quite done with the car just yet. And the other thing that we need to take care of, we'll go back to the engine, is our fuel block right up here. So I talked about it on our disassembly of this engine, that it has the older style fuel block that sits a lot lower for those fuel lines. And the problem with that is your fuel lines can end up rubbing on your hose clamps if you install the hose clamps on your radiator hoses wrong. It can cause a rupture on this fuel line, and obviously you're going to be leaking fuel and you have a big problem on your hands. So there is actually a recall for that, and this car has an open recall. However, this client lives a couple hours away from the closest dealership, and I actually live 20 minutes away from the dealership. So when I first spotted that, I talked to the client, told him about it. He was aware of it. But I did offer to take the car up to the dealership for him, so that way he can get the recall performed and not have to worry about it. And he took me up on my offer. So, pending the weather, as we just saw, we're going to have another drive on the car, and this one's going to be quite a bit more of an extended drive. I'm going to take the back roads to stay off the freeway. You know, don't want to put the car at risk. Cruise on up there. It's actually a pretty scenic and beautiful drive. And drop the car off at the dealership. I'm not sure if that's going to happen today or tomorrow. Again, it's weather dependent. And I will show you guys once we get the car back where this new block sits, because it sits quite a bit higher, and you actually have to be real careful to keep your fuel lines off your hood struts. It takes a lot of finagling. It's not a terribly involved recall, but it's at least worth doing so that way the client doesn't have to worry about it. Now, I was really careful and methodical when I put all my hose clamps on for the radiator hoses so they weren't rubbing the fuel lines, because I know that is an issue. But still, if we can get this taken care of for the client, save him a trip to the dealership, I mean, he would really have to go out of his way to get there. I think it's a win-win overall. So, I think that's all we have for the car now. It's just going to sit here and hang out and wait until I have a good enough break in weather. Hopefully it clears up today. And then we'll run the car up to the dealership, which If you guys haven't figured that out yet, that is where I used to work for 10 years. And maybe we'll be able to see some other cool things while we're up there. I'm not sure. We'll have to see how that goes. But either way, we're going to have a nice, long, extended drive. And once we're back with that recall, I'll show you that new fuel block. All right, so you can see we got the car back home and in the shop. So it made it to the dealer. It got the fuel block recall finished and picked it up just this morning and brought it back home. Now, what I was hoping to show you guys was the car storage facility where I dropped the car off. I happened to drop the car off at the dealership after hours, so they use that facility to allow me to drop it off, keep it in a secure location. And it's honestly a pretty impressive facility with a lot of amazing cars. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to film in there and show you guys, but I'll see if I can dig a couple pictures up on the internet and post them here, some public images that are there. But it's called One Drivers Club, and it is filled with tons of exotics, a lot of Ferrari stuff, a lot of great cars. I was really hoping to bring you guys along and show you, but we couldn't make it happen. That's all right. We'll get a couple pictures popped up there so you can see exactly where we're at. Really cool place. But back to the 355. So I promised I would show you guys after this recall. So we'll come in here, get that opened up. And if we now look at our fuel block up there, you can see how much higher it is sitting. And that is essentially the entire recall. So they replace this aluminum block that bolts up to the power steering reservoir. It raises all of my fuel lines up. These are all the existing fuel lines. It's just that block that gets replaced, and that keeps them elevated away from all the radiator hoses up in the front. The only downside of the recall is it makes the hoses run a lot closer to a hood strut right there. So you need to have, a little bit of patience and some time spent to get these hoses routed so they avoid the strut. Now, fortunately for me, I know everyone that works there. I requested a specific technician to work on it for me. He did an outstanding job on it, which I knew he would. That's why I requested him. So with our fuel block recall done, actually Monday, I'm dropping the car off, getting the clear rod done, and then I think the customer's going to try to be over here Tuesday to pick it up. So that's really going to wrap up our entire project on this 355. We've done a lot of work to this car, covered a lot of things, and heck, it was a lot of fun. It's a little bittersweet to see this 355 go. However, I got to be honest with you guys. You can see that I already have another 355 in here. Now this one is going to be an outstanding project. The client just left. I have the car in for an inspection. I gave it a look over. And this one, yep, I get it. It's another Rosa Corsa GTS. But I'll give you guys a sneak peek. This car actually has the factory carbon fiber seats. Remember on the first video of that car, I mentioned that I had only seen one car with factory carbon fiber seats in my 10 years. This marks number 2. Well, that car has the factory carbon fiber interior package, so I got a couple rare configurations sitting in here. But also this car is an early 94, so it has a non-airbag steering wheel. It's obviously a true 3-pedal car. And the scope of work that we're going to do this is actually going to be very exciting. A lot to cover there. I am already making a video on this car for our initial inspection, so you guys are going to see that here pretty shortly and see what we're going to do to this car. But for this 355, the first one we had in here, it's pretty much all wrapped up, ready to go, and go back to the client. So honestly, saying goodbye to this 355 is a little bittersweet for me. It's been several years since I've worked on a Ferrari, with exception of this 355. There are some very specific reasons for that, but now that we're back working on them, got the first one off the list, I think it turned out great. Hopefully the client is just as happy with it as I am. But, as we said, never fear, got plenty more on the way. Alright, so that's going to wrap up our series of videos on this 1999 F355. For all of you that have been watching all the way through the beginning from our initial inspection on this car, I thank you very much for the support. I really appreciate it, and it does mean quite a bit to me. Before we head off, I do have one more favor to ask of you. So what I would like you to do is get into the comments section and let me know what you would like to see from future videos featuring 355s. I just showed you guys a quick glimpse that we already have another 355 in here, although I've not revealed the scope of work on that one. However, I want to know what you guys want to see. What was I missing on this series of videos for this car? What was I lacking? What did I show too much of? Not enough of? More detail here. So I want to get all the footage and coverage captured for you guys at home, so that way you guys can see and learn everything you want. So I need you to jump in the comments, let me know what you want, and I'll do my best to tailor the videos for you. So you guys know the drill. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We just mentioned what I need you to do in the comments. And I do want to thank you guys once again from the bottom of my heart. I do greatly appreciate all of the support, good comments, and great reception and feedback these videos have gotten. And don't worry guys, many more plan to come along the way. With that being said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.